Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Leviathan and watched the stars change from white lines back to points of light. The massive ship had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of an unknown star system. Jake had been traveling in space for most of his adult life, but this moment felt different. After 300 years of building and planning, humanity was finally ready to meet whatever was out there in the dark. The Leviathan was not a beautiful ship. It was 15 kilometers long and looked like a floating city made of guns and armor. Every surface had weapons or shields or sensors built into it. The ship had been designed by people who expected the worst from the universe. They thought aliens would try to kill humans on sight, so they built something that could fight back and win. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her station and watched the sensor readings come in. Her job was communications, but right now she was just staring at her screen in shock. The readings showed something impossible. There were hundreds of ships in this star system, not human ships. Alien ships. Amy turned to look at Captain Morrison. His face was calm, but she could see surprise in his eyes. They had found aliens, real living aliens with ships and technology. After so many years of silence from space, they were not alone. Doctor. Ben Hughes ran his hands through his gray hair and leaned closer to his science station. The alien ships were unlike anything humans had ever imagined. They were smooth and curved like living things. They flowed through space like fish swimming in water. Some were small like shuttles. Others were huge like cities. All of them moved in perfect patterns around the planets in the star system. Jake walked over to Amy's station and put his hand on her shoulder. He could feel her shaking a little. This was the moment they had all dreamed about and feared. First contact with alien life. Everything humanity did in the next few hours would shape the future of both species. The alien ships seemed to notice the Leviathan at the same moment. Amy's communications board lit up with signals. Dozens of different transmissions were coming from the alien fleet. The computer started working to translate the signals into something humans could understand. Amy looked up at Jake with wide eyes. The translations were coming through now. The aliens were talking to each other, and the words made her stomach drop. Terror, panic, fear. The aliens were afraid of the Leviathan. Jake read the translations over Amy's shoulder. The aliens were calling the Leviathan terrible names: demon ship, deathbringer, void hunter. They thought humans were some kind of monster that had come to destroy them. Dr. Hughes stood up from his station and walked over to them. He had been listening to the alien communications, too. The aliens had never seen humans before, but they knew what the Leviathan was. Somehow they recognized it as a ship built for war and destruction. Amy turned a dial on her communications panel, and the alien voices filled the bridge. Even through the computer translation, the fear in their voices was clear. They were calling for help. They were trying to evacuate their people. They thought the humans had come to kill them all. Jake felt sick. This was not how first contact was supposed to happen. Humans had spent centuries preparing for this moment. They had practiced speeches about peace and friendship. They had planned ceremonies and exchanges of gifts. They had never planned for the aliens to run away in terror. The Leviathan's sensors showed the alien ships moving into defensive positions. They were trying to protect their planets, but their movements seemed slow and clumsy. These aliens had not built their ships for fighting. Their vessels were made for exploration and travel and beauty. They had no weapons that the Leviathan's computers could detect. Ben Hughes pulled up more data on his screen. The alien civilization was enormous. There were dozens of different species working together. Their ships came in hundreds of different designs, but they all shared the same flowing style. These aliens had been cooperating in space for thousands of years. Amy tried to send a peaceful message to the aliens, but every transmission from the Leviathan seemed to make them more afraid. The human ship's normal scanning procedures looked like weapon targeting to the aliens. When the Leviathan's shields powered up automatically, the aliens thought it was preparing to attack. Jake realized the terrible truth. Humans had built the Leviathan to fight against aliens like these. Not because the aliens were evil, but because humans were afraid. The ship was designed by people who thought the universe was full of enemies. Now the Leviathan looked exactly like the enemy the aliens had been taught to fear. The alien fleet was pulling back now. They were moving their ships away from the Leviathan and toward their planets. Some of the smaller vessels were already running toward the edge of the star system. They were going to call for help or warn other aliens about the human ship. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all good people who wanted to explore space and meet new life, but they were riding in a ship that looked like it was built to end worlds. The Leviathan was humanity's greatest achievement and its biggest mistake. The aliens kept talking to each other, and the translations kept coming through. They were calling the Leviathan names that made Jake's heart hurt. Monster, nightmare, the thing that eats light and breathes death. They had never seen anything like it, and they hoped they never would again. Admiral Lisa Stone sat in her office deep inside the Leviathan and stared at the reports coming in from the bridge. The first day of contact with alien life was not going well. Every attempt to communicate peacefully had made the situation worse. The aliens were now calling their ship by a new name that chilled her to the bone: the Galaxy Killer. Lisa had been in charge of building the Leviathan for the last 20 years. She knew every weapon system and every piece of armor on the massive ship. She had designed it to protect humanity from unknown threats. Now she was learning that humanity was the threat the galaxy had been afraid of. Commander Rick Davis knocked on her door and entered the office. His face was grim and tired. He had been trying to establish communication with the aliens for 18 hours straight. Nothing was working. Every message from the Leviathan was being interpreted as a threat or a demand for surrender. Rick sat down across from Lisa and pulled out his tablet. The screen showed a map of the alien star system. Red dots marked the positions of alien ships, and they were all moving away from the Leviathan. The aliens were not just afraid. They were organizing a defense. Lisa looked at the tactical display and felt her heart sink. The aliens had hundreds of ships, but none of them looked like they could fight the Leviathan. Their vessels were beautiful and graceful, but they were not built for war. If this turned into a battle, it would be a massacre. Dr. Hughes had spent the day analyzing alien technology and culture. His reports painted a picture of a civilization that had never known real war. The aliens had conflicts and disagreements, but they solved them through talking and negotiation. They had built a society based on cooperation and mutual aid. Rick showed Lisa the latest intelligence reports. The aliens were calling an emergency meeting of something called the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species were traveling to a planet called Zentara Prime to discuss the human threat. They were treating the arrival of one human ship like an invasion. Lisa stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. She could see some of the alien ships in the distance. They were keeping their distance from the Leviathan, but they were watching, waiting, probably planning. The irony was not lost on her. Humans had spent 3 centuries building the perfect warship to defend against hostile aliens. They had succeeded too well. The Leviathan was so obviously designed for destruction that peaceful aliens could not imagine any other purpose for it. Rick pulled up another report on his tablet. The alien communications that Amy had been monitoring were full of historical references. The aliens kept mentioning something called the Devourers, an ancient race of warriors that had terrorized the galaxy millions of years ago. The aliens thought the Devourers had returned. Lisa read the historical data that Dr. Hughes had compiled. The Devourers had been a nightmare that the galaxy had never forgotten. They had traveled in massive ships and consumed entire planets. They had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy before disappearing without explanation. The trauma had shaped every alien civilization that came after. The worst part was that the Leviathan did look like the ancient Devourer ships, not because humans had copied alien designs, but because there were only so many ways to build a ship meant for war. Function followed form, and both humans and Devourers had built ships that could survive anything and destroy everything else. Rick showed Lisa the latest sensor readings from the alien fleet. The aliens were not just afraid of the Leviathan. They were preparing to die fighting it. Their ships were taking positions that would allow them to sacrifice themselves to slow down the human ship. They were ready to give their lives to protect their worlds. Lisa felt sick thinking about it. If the aliens attacked the Leviathan, her crew would have to defend themselves. The human ship would win easily, but thousands of aliens would die. The galaxy would remember humans as the monsters who had slaughtered peaceful explorers. Dr. Hughes entered the office with his latest analysis. He had been studying alien ship designs and comparing them to human technology. The differences were striking. Alien ships were built for efficiency and beauty. They used advanced materials that were lighter and stronger than anything humans had, but they had no armor and no weapons. The alien approach to space travel was completely different from the human approach. Where humans had built the Leviathan to survive in a hostile universe, aliens had built ships to explore a friendly one. They had never needed to prepare for war because they had learned to avoid it. Rick pulled up a communication from Captain Morrison on the bridge. The situation was getting worse by the hour. More alien ships were arriving in the system. Some of them looked like military vessels, but even those were clearly not built for serious fighting. They were police ships meant to handle small conflicts between civilian vessels. Lisa realized that humanity was facing a choice that would define their future. They could try to prove their peaceful intentions and risk being seen as weak or deceptive. Or they could embrace their role as the galaxy's new military power and risk becoming the very monsters the aliens feared. The communications board in her office chimed with an incoming message. Amy had managed to establish a partial communication link with one of the alien ships. The message was simple and heartbreaking. The aliens wanted to know what humans wanted from them. They were offering to surrender if the humans would spare their worlds. Lisa stared at the message for a long time. The aliens thought humans had come to conquer them. They could not imagine any other reason for a ship like the Leviathan to exist. In their minds, humans were already the enemy. The only question was how much damage the galaxy would suffer before the humans were satisfied. Ambassador Zexhai of the Valorian Republic stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. In the Great Chamber on Zentara Prime, representatives from 47 different species had gathered to discuss the return of their oldest nightmare. The humans had arrived and the galaxy was terrified. Zexhai looked out at the assembled delegates and saw fear in every face. The Zentarians with their large eyes were blinking rapidly in distress. The Corvani were making the low humming sounds they made when extremely worried. Even the usually calm ethereals were shifting their energy forms in agitation. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed the human ship in all its terrible detail. The Leviathan hung in space, like a geometric nightmare. Every line and angle of its design screamed violence. It was 15 kilometers of armor and weapons wrapped around what the analysts believed was a crew of monsters. High Counselor Dexera of the First Species called the session to order. His voice carried the authority of 10 million years of galactic civilization. The First Species had been among the founders of the Galactic Council, and their word carried enormous weight. When Dexera spoke, the galaxy listened. The first speaker was military advisor Kethron of the Defense Corps. He had spent the last 2 days analyzing the human ship, and his report was grim. The Leviathan carried more firepower than the entire Galactic Council fleet combined. Its armor was thicker than most space stations. Its weapons could destroy planets. Zexhai listened to the technical analysis and felt her hearts sinking. The humans had built a ship that could fight the entire galaxy and win. Every weapon system was designed for maximum destruction. Every defensive measure was built to ensure the ship's survival against impossible odds. Dr. Veltar of the Xenobiology Institute presented his analysis of human psychology based on their ship design. His conclusions were terrifying. Humans appeared to be a warrior species that had evolved from apex predators. They thought in terms of domination and survival. Peace was probably not a concept they understood. The historical analysis came next. Archivist Nex Allah of the Memory Keepers had spent days comparing the human ship to ancient records of the Devourers. The similarities were undeniable. Both species had built massive warships. Both had emerged from unknown regions of space. Both represented existential threats to galactic civilization. HFY stood to address the Council when her turn came. As the representative of one of the largest peaceful species in the galaxy, her words would influence the Council's decision. She had spent her life promoting cooperation and understanding between species. Now she had to decide whether humanity deserved the same consideration. She began by acknowledging the fear that everyone felt. The human ship was indeed terrifying. It represented a level of military thinking that the galaxy had not seen since the Devourer Wars. But she reminded the Council that they had only encountered one ship from one species. They did not yet know what humans wanted. The debate that followed was heated and emotional. Some delegates called for immediate military action. They wanted to destroy the human ship before it could call for reinforcements. Others argued for attempted diplomacy despite the obvious risks. A few suggested fleeing to distant galaxies and leaving humans to rule this one. Commander Zareth of the Rapid Response Fleet presented the military options. The Council could assemble every warship in the galaxy and attempt to overwhelm the human vessel. The cost would be enormous. Thousands of ships would be destroyed, and millions of crew members would die. But it might be possible to stop the humans before they could establish a foothold in the galaxy. HFY argued against immediate violence. She pointed out that the humans had not actually attacked anyone yet. Their ship was sitting peacefully at the edge of the star system. They had made attempts to communicate. Perhaps they were not the monsters everyone assumed they were. The response from the Council was skeptical at best. Delegate Morkan of the Trader Guilds pointed out that the human ship's very existence was a threat. No peaceful species would build such a weapon. The humans might be waiting for reinforcements or studying galactic defenses before beginning their conquest. Dr. Yelana of the Behavioral Sciences Institute presented a different perspective. She had been analyzing human attempts at communication and found patterns that suggested intelligence and curiosity rather than pure aggression. The humans seemed to be trying to establish peaceful contact, but they were failing because of cultural misunderstandings. The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to evacuate their border worlds and prepare for war. Others suggested attempting to negotiate a tribute system that might satisfy the human appetite for conquest. A few optimistic delegates still believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. HFY found herself caught between her natural desire for peace and her duty to protect her people. The human ship was indeed a nightmare made manifest. But she had spent her career believing that any species intelligent enough to build starships was intelligent enough to choose cooperation over conflict. The vote was closer than expected. 24. Species voted to attempt continued diplomatic contact, while 23 voted for immediate military action. The tie-breaking vote came from the first species, and High Counselor Dex Ara chose diplomacy. The galaxy would try one more time to communicate with the humans before declaring war. But the decision came with conditions. The Galactic Council would assemble the largest fleet in its history and position it just outside the human ship's sensor range. If the humans made any aggressive moves, the response would be swift and overwhelming. The galaxy would not be caught, unprepared like their ancestors had been with the Devourers. HFY felt relief and terror in equal measure. The galaxy had chosen to give peace a chance, but everyone knew how slim that chance was. The humans had built a ship that could only be intended for war. The question was whether they would choose to use it. As the council session ended, HFY looked one more time at the image of the human ship. It hung in space like a metallic predator waiting to strike. Every instinct told her that humanity was a threat to everything the galaxy had built. But her heart still hoped that appearances could be deceiving and that intelligence might triumph over fear. Commander Rick Davis stood in the shuttle bay of the Leviathan and checked his equipment one final time. He was about to attempt something that no human had ever done before. He was going to visit an alien world and try to convince an entire galaxy that humanity was not a threat. The weight of his species' future rested on his shoulders. The diplomatic shuttle that would carry him to Zentara Prime was a smaller version of the Leviathan. It had the same angular design and heavy armor that characterized all human spacecraft. Rick looked at it with new eyes and realized how terrifying it must appear to aliens who had never seen anything built purely for survival. Dr. Ben Hughes joined Rick in the shuttle bay along with the small diplomatic team. Ben would serve as the mission's xenobiologist and cultural advisor. He had spent the last week studying everything they had learned about alien society. His job was to help Rick avoid the cultural mistakes that could start a war. Captain Morrison came to see them off personally. His face was grim and tired. The basic situation with the aliens had not improved in the 3 days since first contact. If anything, it had gotten worse. More alien ships were arriving in the system every hour, and their fear was turning into anger. Rick strapped himself into the pilot's seat of the shuttle and began the pre-flight checklist. The small ship carried no weapons, but its defensive systems were more advanced than anything the aliens had ever seen. Even their peaceful diplomatic mission would arrive in what looked like a miniature warship. The shuttle launched from the Leviathan and began its journey toward Zentara Prime. The trip would take 6 hours, and Rick spent the time reviewing everything they knew about alien psychology and culture. The information was fragmentary, but it painted a picture of species that had evolved very differently from humans. Ben pulled up his analysis of alien ship designs and explained the cultural implications to Rick. Where humans had built ships to survive in a hostile universe, aliens had built ships to explore a friendly one. Their vessels were works of art as much as they were transportation. Form followed function, but beauty was always part of the equation. The differences went deeper than just design philosophy. Human space travel had been driven by necessity and competition. Earth's resources were limited, and humanity had to expand or die. Alien space travel seemed to be driven by curiosity and cooperation. They explored because they wanted to learn, not because they had to survive. Rick began to understand why the aliens were so terrified of humanity. In their experience, only monsters built ships like the Leviathan. Peaceful species had no need for such overwhelming firepower. The humans had announced themselves to the galaxy by arriving in what looked like a planet killer. The shuttle's sensors detected the alien fleet long before Zentara Prime came into view. Hundreds of ships were positioned throughout the system in defensive formations. They were clearly not warships, but they were ready to sacrifice themselves to protect their world. Rick felt sick thinking about the slaughter that would result if this went wrong. Zentara Prime appeared on the view screen as a blue and green world that reminded Rick of Earth. Cities covered the continents and orbital stations ringed the planet. Billions of aliens lived here in apparent peace and prosperity. This was what galactic civilization looked like when it was not constantly preparing for war. The alien ships escorting Rick's shuttle were beautiful in a way that human vessels never were. They flowed through space like living things, and their hulls seemed to shimmer with internal light. Rick could see why the aliens were horrified by human ship design. The two approaches to space travel could not have been more different. Zentara Prime's space traffic control guided Rick's shuttle to a landing pad near the capital city. Even the landing pad was a work of art with flowing curves and integrated gardens. Rick realized that the aliens had built their entire civilization around principles of beauty and harmony. Ben monitored the alien communications as they landed and provided a running translation. The aliens were calling Rick's shuttle by names. That made him wince. Death pod, torture chamber, coffin of nightmares. Even their smallest ship was seen as an instrument of terror. Rick and Ben emerged from the shuttle wearing their best diplomatic uniforms. They had chosen clothing that was as non-threatening as possible, but they still looked like soldiers to alien eyes. Human fashion had been influenced by centuries of military thinking, and even their formal wear had a martial appearance. The alien delegation that met them at the landing pad was led by Ambassador HFY. She was tall and graceful with 4 arms, and skin that changed color based on her emotions. Right now, her skin was showing patterns that Ben's cultural database identified as extreme caution mixed with curiosity. HFY spoke through a translation device that converted her words into human speech. Her voice was musical and pleasant, but Rick could hear the underlying tension. She welcomed them to Zentara Prime, but her body language suggested she was ready to flee at any moment. The journey to the council chambers took them through the alien capital city. Rick stared in wonder at architecture that seemed to grow from the ground like plants. Buildings curved and flowed in impossible ways. Gardens were integrated into every structure. Art was everywhere. This was a society that had chosen beauty over efficiency. Ben whispered cultural observations to Rick as they walked. The aliens they passed on the street showed the same mix of curiosity and fear that HFY displayed. Some tried to get closer, looks at the humans. Others hurried away as quickly as possible. Children peeked out from behind their parents with wide eyes. The council chambers were a vast amphitheater filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. Rick had never imagined such diversity of life. Some aliens were humanoid like HFY, others were completely different. Some seemed to be made of living energy. Others looked like mobile plants or crystalline structures. High Counselor Dexara called the session to order, and Rick stepped forward to address the galaxy for the first time. He had prepared a speech about human desire for peace and cooperation. He had practiced it hundreds of times, but looking out at the sea of alien faces, he realized that words would not be enough. The aliens were not just afraid of human military power. They were afraid of what humanity represented. The humans had solved the problem of cosmic loneliness through strength and preparation for war. The aliens had solved it through cooperation and the creation of beauty. The two approaches seemed incompatible. Rick began his speech by acknowledging the fear that filled the chamber. He admitted that the Leviathan looked terrifying because it was terrifying. Humans had built it to fight unknown threats in an apparently empty universe. They had never imagined meeting peaceful aliens who would see their ship as a nightmare come to life. Dr. Ben Hughes sat in the alien laboratory on Zentara Prime and watched Zentala work with fascination. The alien xenopsychologist was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Her crystalline body refracted light in beautiful patterns, and her mind seemed to process information in ways that defied human understanding. She was studying humanity with the same intensity that Ben was studying alien culture. The cultural exchange program had been Ambassador HFY's idea. Instead of continuing to talk past each other in formal diplomatic sessions, she had suggested that humans and aliens spend time learning about each other's societies. Ben had volunteered immediately despite the obvious risks. Zentala showed Ben recordings of ancient galactic history that had been preserved in crystal matrices for millions of years. The images showed the galaxy as it had been before the Devourer Wars. Thousands of species had lived in harmony and prosperity. Art and science had flourished. War had been almost unknown. Then, came the Devourers. The recordings showed massive ships that looked disturbingly similar to the Leviathan. They had arrived from unknown regions of space and begun consuming entire worlds, not just the resources, but the life itself. They had fed on the energy of living beings and left dead planets in their wake. Ben watched the recordings with growing horror. He could see why the aliens were terrified of humanity. The similarity between Devourer ships and human ships was not coincidental. Both species had built vessels designed for maximum destructive capability. The difference was that humans had built theirs for defense, while Devourers had built theirs for conquest. Shantala explained that the trauma of the Devourer Wars had shaped every aspect of galactic civilization. Species had learned to cooperate because division had nearly led to extinction. They had built beautiful ships because ugly ones reminded them of the nightmare they had barely survived. They had chosen peace because they had seen the alternative. Ben shared human history in return. He told Zentala about Earth and humanity's long struggle for survival. Humans had evolved as hunters and competitors. They had fought each other for resources and territory for thousands of years. When they finally reached space, they had expected to find more of the same. The revelation that humans had been alone in space for centuries shocked Zentala. She could not imagine the psychological impact of believing that your species was the only intelligent life in the universe. No wonder humans had built ships like the Leviathan. They had prepared for the worst because they had no reason to expect anything better. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Nina Bell was having her own cultural exchange aboard an alien vessel called the Harmony of Thoughts. The ship's captain, Felandra, had agreed to let Nina experience alien space travel firsthand. The differences were immediately apparent. The alien ship felt more like a living organism than a machine. The walls seemed to pulse gently, and the lighting changed to match the crew's emotional states. There were no sharp edges or harsh angles anywhere. Even the control panels were curved and smooth. Everything was designed to promote comfort and well-being. Nina observed the alien crew at work and was amazed by their level of cooperation. There was no chain of command in the human sense. Decisions were made through consensus and discussion. Everyone's opinion was valued regardless of rank or species. Conflicts were resolved through mediation rather than authority. The alien approach to space travel was completely different from the human approach. Where human ships were built to survive anything the universe could throw at them, alien ships were built to work in harmony with the natural forces of space. They rode gravitational currents like sailing ships rode the wind. Felandra explained that alien technology was based on cooperation with natural forces rather than domination of them. Their ships were powered by carefully contained singularities that fed on cosmic background radiation. Their weapons, when they had them at all, were designed to disable rather than destroy. Nina began to understand why the aliens found human technology so disturbing. Human ships fought against the universe and bent it to their will through brute force. Alien ships danced with the universe and found elegant solutions to complex problems. The two philosophies were fundamentally incompatible. Back on Zentara Prime, Pilot Officer Alex Porter was learning about alien art and culture from Yalandra, a poet and philosopher from the Ethereal Collective. The Ethereals existed as pure energy and could take any form they chose. Yalandra often appeared as shifting patterns of light that reflected her thoughts and emotions. Alex was shown alien art that had been created over millions of years. Sculptures that seemed to move and change when viewed from different angles, music that could be felt as much as heard, poetry that painted pictures in the mind. Every piece was designed to inspire wonder and promote understanding between species. Yelandra explained that alien art was not just decoration. It was a form of communication that transcended language and species barriers. Through art, aliens shared their deepest thoughts and feelings with others who might be completely different from them. Art was what held galactic civilization together. Alex shared human art in return. He showed Yelandra recordings of human music and literature and visual art. The alien was fascinated by the way human creativity was shaped by conflict and struggle. Human art often dealt with themes of survival and competition that were foreign to alien culture. The cultural exchanges continued for days and gradually began to change attitudes on both sides. The aliens started to see humans as fellow beings, struggling with the same cosmic loneliness that all intelligent species faced. Humans began to understand that their military approach to space travel was not the only possible solution. Ben made a breakthrough when he realized that humans and aliens had evolved different responses to the same fundamental problem. Both had faced the vast emptiness of space and the fear of being alone in the universe. Aliens had responded by building connections and creating beauty. Humans had responded by building strength and preparing for threats. Neither approach was wrong. They were simply different solutions to the same challenge. The galaxy needed both approaches. Beauty and cooperation were wonderful when times were peaceful. Strength and preparation were necessary when times were dangerous. The ideal civilization would combine both philosophies. Sentala agreed with Ben's analysis, but pointed out a crucial problem. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that most species had forgotten how to defend themselves. They had beautiful ships and advanced technology, but they were helpless against real military threats. The arrival of the Leviathan had reminded them of their vulnerability. Ben realized that this was the key to human integration into galactic society. Humans could provide the military strength that the galaxy lacked while learning to appreciate the beauty and cooperation that aliens had perfected. The two cultures could complement each other rather than compete. Scanner operator Julie Kane was running her normal sensor sweeps from the Leviathan's bridge when her instruments detected something that made her blood run cold. A massive object was moving through the outer reaches of the star system at tremendous speed. Her initial readings suggested it was an asteroid, but the trajectory was all wrong. Someone had turned a mountain-sized rock into a weapon. Julie called out her findings to Captain Morrison, who rushed to her station to examine the data. The asteroid was roughly 10 kilometers across, and it was moving at nearly 15% of light speed. Worse yet, its course would take it directly into Zentara Prime in less than 8 hours. The impact would destroy the planet and kill billions of aliens. Dr. Hughes ran calculations on his workstation and confirmed Julie's worst fears. The kinetic energy of the asteroid impact would be equivalent to millions of nuclear weapons. Nothing on Zentara Prime would survive. The planet would be cracked open like an egg and scattered across space. Captain Morrison immediately opened communications with the alien fleet. He tried to warn them about the incoming asteroid, but the aliens initially thought it was some kind of human trick. They believed the humans were threatening to destroy Zentara Prime unless the aliens surrendered. Commander Rick Davis was still on the planet's surface attending diplomatic meetings when the warnings came through. He contacted Ambassador Zexhai and tried to explain the situation, but she was suspicious of human motives. Why would humans warn aliens about a threat unless they were responsible for creating it? The truth became clear when alien sensors finally detected the asteroid for themselves. The object was not under human control. It had been launched from the lawless rim regions of the galaxy, where pirates and criminals operated beyond the reach of civilized authority. Someone had decided to use the chaos of first contact to destroy one of the galaxy's most important worlds. Zexhai immediately called an emergency session of the planetary government. The asteroid was too large and moving too fast for conventional evacuation procedures. They might be able to save a few million people, but most of the planet's population was doomed. The aliens had never faced a threat like this because they had built their civilization around the assumption that such threats would not exist. The Galactic Council fleet tried to intercept the asteroid, but their ships were not designed for this kind of work. Their weapons were meant for disabling other ships or clearing small debris from shipping lanes. They had nothing that could destroy or deflect an object the size of a small moon moving at relativistic speeds. Captain Morrison watched the alien efforts with growing frustration. He knew the Leviathan could stop the asteroid easily, but the aliens would not ask for help. They were still too afraid of human intentions. They would rather die than trust the species they saw as galactic destroyers. Julie continued tracking the asteroid and providing updates on its approach. The alien evacuation efforts were proceeding too slowly. Even if they worked around the clock, they would only save a tiny fraction of Zentara Prime's population. The beautiful world that had served as the cultural heart of galactic civilization, for thousands of years was about to become a graveyard. Dr. Hughes studied the asteroid's composition and origin. His analysis suggested it had been launched months ago from a rogue planet in the outer rim. The timing was not coincidental. Someone had planned this attack to occur during humanity's first contact with the galaxy. They wanted to make it look like human aggression. The realization hit Morrison like a physical blow. This was a test, not just of human military capability, but of human character. The galaxy was watching to see how humanity would respond to a crisis that they had not created, but could easily solve. Would they help, or would they stand back and let billions die? Morrison made his decision without consulting Earth or any higher authority. He ordered the Leviathan to move toward the asteroid's projected path. The human ship could intercept the threat and destroy it, but doing so would reveal the full extent of human military power to the watching galaxy. The alien fleet detected the Leviathan's movement and panicked. They thought the humans were finally making their aggressive move. Several alien ships tried to intercept the human vessel, but their weapons could not penetrate its shields. The Leviathan brushed them aside like insects and continued toward its target. Chief Engineer Carl Brooks began powering up the ship's main weapons systems. The Leviathan carried enough firepower to sterilize planets, but it had never used its weapons in anger. The crew had trained for combat, but they had never faced a real enemy. This would be their first taste of what their ship was truly capable of. Dr. Kate Wilson took her position at the tactical station and began calculating firing solutions. The asteroid was massive and moving fast, but it was not maneuvering or defended. A single salvo from the Leviathan's main guns would be enough to vaporize it completely. The challenge was timing the shot correctly. Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien fleet and tried to explain what the Leviathan was doing. He told them that humans were going to destroy the asteroid and save Zentara Prime. But his words were lost in the chaos of alien panic and disbelief. They could not imagine that the terrifying human ship was actually coming to help them. The asteroid entered the inner system and became visible to the naked eye from Zentara Prime's surface. It appeared as a bright star moving across the sky, but everyone knew what it really was. Children on the planet looked up at their approaching death while their parents tried to find words of comfort. Wilson acquired a target lock on the asteroid and prepared to fire. The Leviathan's weapons had never been used outside of training exercises, but she was confident in their effectiveness. Human engineering was brutal and efficient. When human weapons fired, their targets died. The moment of truth arrived as the asteroid reached the optimal intercept point. Wilson fired every weapon the Leviathan possessed in a coordinated barrage that lit up space like a small sun. Nuclear warheads, kinetic projectiles, and energy beams struck the asteroid simultaneously from multiple angles. The mountain-sized rock simply ceased to exist. In less than 3 seconds, 10 billion tons of stone and metal were converted into a cloud of glowing plasma that dispersed harmlessly into space. The threat to Zentara Prime was over, and billions of lives had been saved. The alien fleet stopped their panicked maneuvers and stared at what the humans had accomplished. They had just witnessed the casual destruction of an object that could have killed a planet. The Leviathan had eliminated a threat that the entire Galactic Council fleet could not have stopped. Morrison opened communications again and this time, the aliens listened. He explained that humans had not come to conquer the galaxy. They had come to explore and learn and make friends, but they had also come prepared to defend themselves and others against threats that peaceful civilizations could not handle alone. Ambassador Zexhai stood on the observation deck of the council chambers on Zentara Prime and stared up at the night sky where the asteroid should have been. Instead of a growing point of light bringing death to her world, there was only empty space and the distant glow of dispersing plasma. The humans had saved them all. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in recorded history. Representatives who had been preparing for evacuation and death were now trying to process what they had witnessed. The terrifying human ship had not attacked them. It had protected them from a threat they could not have stopped themselves. Hi. Counselor Dexara called for order, but his voice lacked its usual authority. The ancient leader of the first species was struggling to understand what had happened. The humans had revealed military power beyond anything the galaxy possessed, but they had used it to save alien lives rather than take them. Military advisor Kethron presented his analysis of the human weapons demonstration. The Leviathan had destroyed the asteroid with casual ease using technology that was both primitive and devastatingly effective. Human weapons were based on simple principles like kinetic force and nuclear fusion, but they were applied with overwhelming power. Dr. Veltar revised his psychological assessment of humanity based on their actions. A purely aggressive species would have let the asteroid destroy Zentara Prime and then conquered the survivors. The humans had chosen to reveal their capabilities in order to save lives. This suggested a moral code that Veltar had not expected. To find in such a militaristic species, Zexhai requested permission to address the council and was granted the floor. She had been watching the human ship since its arrival, and she had seen something that others had missed. The Leviathan was not just a weapon, it was also a home. Thousands of humans lived aboard that vessel, and they had built a society in the depths of space. She shared her observations about human culture gathered during the diplomatic exchanges. Humans had art and music and literature just like other intelligent species. They valued beauty and creativity and learning. But they had combined these peaceful pursuits with a military mindset that was foreign to galactic civilization. Commander Rick Davis was invited to address the council via communication link from the planet's surface. He tried to explain the human perspective on the situation. Humanity had not built the Leviathan to threaten others. They had built it to survive in what they thought was a hostile universe. The discovery of peaceful aliens had surprised them as much as the arrival of the human ship had surprised the galaxy. Rick acknowledged that the Leviathan was indeed a terrible weapon, but he pointed out that terrible weapons were sometimes necessary. The asteroid that had threatened Zentara Prime proved that peaceful civilizations needed protection from those who would destroy them. Humans could provide that protection if the galaxy would accept them. The debate that followed was intense, but different from previous discussions. The fear was still there, but it was tempered by gratitude and a growing understanding of human motivations. Some delegates argued that humans were too dangerous to trust regardless of their recent actions. Others suggested that human military power might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Dr. Yelana presented new behavioral analysis based on human actions during the crisis. She had been studying the communications between human crew members as they prepared to intercept the asteroid. The humans had shown concern for alien lives and determination to save them. There had been no discussion of using the crisis for political advantage. Archivist Nexala compared the current situation to historical records of species joining the Galactic Council. Every new member had brought unique capabilities and perspectives. The humans would bring military strength that had been lacking since the ancient days before the Devourer Wars. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to accept such power. The turning point came when scanner operator Julie Kane aboard. The Leviathan detected another threat. Her sensors showed a fleet of unidentified ships approaching the system from the galactic rim. The vessels were clearly military in nature, and they were not responding to communication attempts. Captain Morrison immediately shared the sensor data with the Galactic Council fleet. The approaching ships matched the design signatures of the pirates who had launched the asteroid attack. They were coming to finish what the asteroid had started, and they were bringing enough firepower to overwhelm the peaceful alien vessels. Zexhai looked around the council chambers and saw the same realization on every face. The asteroid had been a test, but not just of human character. It had been a probe to measure galactic defenses. The pirates had learned that the peaceful aliens could not protect themselves, and now they were coming to harvest the wealth of Zentara Prime. The Galactic Council fleet began moving into defensive positions, but everyone knew it was hopeless. The alien ships were beautiful and advanced, but they were not built for warfare. They carried scientists and diplomats and artists, not soldiers. They would be slaughtered by pirates who had spent their lives perfecting the art of violence. Councilor Dexara faced the hardest decision of his long life. He could maintain galactic dignity and lead his people to noble defeat against the pirates, or he could ask the humans for help and admit that peaceful civilization needed the protection of warriors. Morrison made the decision easier by opening communications with the Council. He offered the services of the Leviathan and its crew without being asked. Humans had come to this star system hoping to make friends with aliens. He would not stand by and watch those potential friends be destroyed by common criminals. The Council voted quickly and with unusual unanimity. They requested human assistance in defending Zentara Prime and its people. The vote was not just about accepting military aid. It was about accepting humanity as potential partners in galactic civilization. Morrison acknowledged the request and began preparing the Leviathan for battle. This would be different from destroying the asteroid. The pirates had ships and weapons and crews who knew how to fight. The coming battle would test not just human technology, but human tactics and resolve. Dr. Kate Wilson took her position at the tactical station and began analyzing the pirate fleet. The enemy ships were crude compared to either human or alien vessels, but they were numerous and heavily armed. They had been built for one purpose, taking what they wanted from those too weak to stop them. Communications Officer Amy Carter monitored pirate transmissions and provided translations to the A crew. The pirates were confident of victory and already arguing about how to divide the spoils of Zentara Prime. They saw the Galactic Council fleet as easy prey, and they had not yet detected the human ship waiting in the planet's shadow. Morrison realized that this battle would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. If the Leviathan won, humans would be seen as protectors and potential allies. If they lost or showed weakness, both humanity and the peaceful aliens would be at the mercy of those who chose violence over cooperation. The pirate fleet entered the inner system and began their attack on the alien vessels. Elegant council ships exploded under crude but effective weapons fire. The slaughter had begun, and only the humans could stop it. The Leviathan emerged from behind Zentara Prime like a nightmare rising from the depths of space. Captain Jake Morrison had positioned his ship to maximize the element of surprise, and the effect was devastating. The pirate fleet had been concentrating on destroying the helpless alien vessels when 15 kilometers of human warship appeared among them. Dr. Kate Wilson fired the opening salvo before the pirates could react. The Leviathan's main guns spoke with voices of thunder and lightning. Pirate ships that had been built in orbital junkyards exploded like firecrackers under the assault of weapons designed to fight peer military powers. In the first 30 seconds of combat, Wilson destroyed 6 enemy vessels. Communications Officer Amy Carter monitored pirate transmissions as panic spread through their ranks. The crude criminals had expected easy prey, but they had found an apex predator instead. Their communications dissolved into screaming and chaos as they tried to understand what was happening to their fleet. The pirates attempted to return fire, but their weapons could barely scratch the Leviathan's armor. human defensive technology, had been designed to survive attacks from unknown alien superweapons. The improvised guns and missile launchers of Rim pirates were no more threatening than thrown rocks. Chief Engineer Carl Brooks rerouted power to the ship's weapon systems and tactical shields. The Leviathan was performing exactly as it had been designed to perform. Every system worked flawlessly under combat conditions. 3 centuries of human engineering and paranoia had produced a ship that was unstoppable in battle. Morrison coordinated the attack from his captain's chair while watching the tactical display. The pirate fleet had numerical superiority, but they were falling apart under pressure. Some ships tried to flee. Others attempted desperate ramming attacks. A few just stopped moving as their crews abandoned their posts. Scanner operator Julie. Kane tracked every enemy vessel and fed targeting data to Wilson's tactical station. The pirates had brought 43 ships into the system, but that number was dropping rapidly. Human weapons technology was proving its effectiveness against opponents who had built their vessels for intimidation rather than combat. The Galactic Council fleet had pulled back to safe distance and was watching the battle in amazement. Ambassador HFY stood on the bridge of her flagship and stared at the human ship as it systematically destroyed an entire pirate fleet. The Leviathan moved through space like a living thing, dodging enemy fire while dealing death with mechanical precision. Dr. Ben Hughes provided tactical analysis from his science station. The pirates were using hit-and-run tactics that might have worked against peaceful traders or lightly armed patrol ships. Against a purpose-built warship like the Leviathan, their strategy was suicide. They simply did not have the firepower to penetrate human defenses. Wilson targeted the pirate command ship and hit it with a concentrated barrage that vaporized the vessel instantly. The loss of leadership sent the remaining pirates into complete panic. Some tried to surrender while others attempted to escape into hyperspace. Morrison ordered his crew to disable the fleeing ships rather than destroy them. Lieutenant Colonel Nina Bell coordinated with the alien fleet to capture pirates who were abandoning their destroyed vessels. The humans had proven their military superiority, but they were also showing mercy to defeated enemies. This combination of strength and restraint impressed the watching aliens more than pure destruction would have. The battle lasted less than an hour from first shot to final surrender. When the fighting ended, the pirate threat had been completely eliminated. 43 enemy ships had been destroyed or captured with minimal damage to the Galactic Council fleet and no damage at all to the Leviathan. High Counselor Dexara opened communications with Captain Morrison and formally thanked humanity for saving Zentara Prime and its people. The ancient leader of the first species acknowledged that he had been wrong about human intentions. The Leviathan was indeed a terrifying weapon, but it was wielded by people who chose to protect rather than conquer. Morrison accepted the thanks graciously, but pointed out that humans had only done what anyone should do when innocent people were threatened. The galaxy contained predators who would take advantage of peaceful civilizations. Someone had to be willing and able to stop them. Ambassador HFY requested permission to come aboard the Leviathan for a personal meeting with the human captain. She wanted to see the interior of the ship that had saved her world and meet the people who had chosen to fight for strangers. The tour of the Leviathan was a revelation for HFY. She had expected to find a ship full of warriors living in Spartan military conditions. Instead, she discovered a floating city where humans had built a complete civilization. There were schools and hospitals and parks and theaters alongside the weapons and armor. Pilot Officer Alex Porter showed HFY the ship's cultural center, where human art and music were displayed alongside alien works that had been gifted during the diplomatic exchanges. The humans had not just brought weapons to the galaxy. They had brought their entire society, including their capacity for beauty and creativity. Morrison explained the human philosophy to HFY as they walked through the ship's corridors. Humans had built the Leviathan to be both a warship and a home because they believed that anything worth fighting for was worth living for. They had not come to the galaxy as conquerors, but as potential neighbors. The formal ceremony took place in the Galactic Council chambers on Zentara Prime 3, days after the battle. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness humanity's official acceptance into galactic civilization. The vote was unanimous for the first time in Council history. High Counselor Dexara presented Captain Morrison with the Star of Unity, the highest honor that the Galactic Council could bestow. The ancient symbol had been created to represent the cooperation that held galactic civilization together. Now it would also represent the strength needed to protect that cooperation. Morrison accepted the honor on behalf of all humanity, but he made it clear that humans did not want to rule the galaxy. They wanted to serve as its guardians. The Leviathan and ships like it would patrol the dangerous regions where pirates and criminals operated. They would ensure that peaceful civilizations could continue to choose beauty over violence. Dr. Hughes gave the closing address at the ceremony. He spoke about the different paths that intelligent species could take when facing the loneliness of the universe. Some chose cooperation and art and the creation of beauty. Others chose strength and preparation and the development of defenses. The galaxy needed both approaches to survive and prosper. Zexhai responded with her own speech about the lessons that aliens had learned from humanity. She acknowledged that peaceful civilizations had become complacent and vulnerable. They had forgotten that the universe contained threats that required military responses. Humans would help them remember, while aliens helped humans appreciate the beauty that made life worth protecting. The ceremony ended with a joint declaration that established humanity as the military arm of galactic civilization. Human ships would patrol the dangerous frontiers while alien vessels explored new worlds and made new discoveries. The two approaches would work together to ensure that both strength and beauty could flourish among the stars. Captain Morrison returned to the Leviathan knowing that humanity's role in the galaxy had been decided. They would be the guardians who watched the dark spaces between stars. They would be the shield that protected those who chose to create rather than destroy. It was a heavy responsibility, but it was also an honor that humans would bear with pride. The galaxy was no longer a lonely place for humanity. They had found their place among the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors. The Leviathan sailed on through space, carrying both the weapons needed to defend civilization and the dreams of those who believed that cooperation was possible even in a dangerous universe.